The wind off Lake Geneva cut through my coat like a blade, and I pressed myself against the marble column outside the Hotel Beau Rivage, balancing a tray of empty champagne flutes I'd just collected from the terrace. February in Switzerland felt like punishment for sins I hadn't committed yet. My fingers ached inside the thin gloves the catering company provided, black polyester that matched my uniform but did nothing against the cold. Inside, warmth and wealth moved in circles I'd never enter. I was 26, spoke 4 languages fluently, and spent my evenings invisible to people who'd tip more for a smile than I earned in a week. The VIP section hummed with a different frequency tonight. I'd worked enough events to recognize when power walked through a door. The usual guests, banking executives, diplomats, trust fund socialites, they performed wealth. But the man who'd arrived an hour ago in the charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent, he simply existed in it. Dark hair swept back from a face carved from severity and secrets. Eyes that tracked movement with the precision of someone who calculated risk for breakfast. He'd glanced at me exactly once when I refilled his water glass, and I'd felt it like a hand at my throat, not violent, just absolute. I pushed through the service entrance, grateful for the blast of kitchen heat. My phone buzzed against my hip. I almost didn't check it, but the second vibration made my stomach drop. Nana. I ducked into the staff corridor and answered in rapid Italian. Tesoro, the pain is worse tonight. My grandmother's voice cracked like old paper. I'll call Dr. Morrow in the morning, Nana. Did you take the medication? My throat tightened. The doctor had been blunt last month. Her heart was failing, and the wait list for a specialist who could actually help rather than just manage her decline stretched into months we didn't have. The pills do nothing anymore. I'm tired, Alessia, she coughed, wet and rattling. I just wanted to hear your voice. I pressed my forehead against the cool wall, switching to English when my manager rounded the corner with a glare. I love you. I'll be home by midnight. Rest. When I hung up, the man in the charcoal suit was standing 15 feet away, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Not curiosity, assessment. The kind of look that decided whether you were useful or disposable. You speak Italian, he said. Not a question. His accent was Swiss German underneath the flawless English, rounded edges that suggested old money and older secrets. Among other things, I straightened, suddenly aware of how small the corridor felt. Can I help you with something, sir? He tilted his head slightly. You're wasted carrying glasses. Before I could respond, my manager appeared, his smile sharp and servile. Mr. Keller, is there a problem? So that was his name. Keller. I'd heard whispers in the kitchen. The owner of half the luxury properties in Geneva, private logistics empire. The kind of man who made problems disappear before they became headlines. No problem, Keller said, his gaze still fixed on me. I'd like to speak with her, privately. My manager's smile faltered for half a second before snapping back into place. Of course. Alessia, please accompany Mr. Keller to the owner's office. The office smelled like leather and bergamot. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, where lights from distant villas scattered across the black water like fallen stars. Keller moved behind the desk with the ease of someone who owned not just the room but the gravity inside it. He didn't sit. Instead, he pulled a business card from his jacket and placed it precisely in the center of the polished wood. I need a translator, he said. Someone fluent in Italian, French, and German. Someone discreet who understands how to navigate delicate business situations without broadcasting every detail to the nearest gossip column. I stared at the card. Keller Holdings, followed by a Geneva address that probably required a second mortgage just to visit. I have a job. One that pays barely enough to cover rent in this city, much less the medical care your grandmother needs. His tone didn't shift, no threat, just data. I heard your conversation. Swiss specialists don't wait for dying women with public insurance. The words hit like a fist. You don't know anything about. I know Dr. Eduard Zimmerman is the best cardiac specialist in Europe. I know he doesn't take new patients unless someone with influence asks. I also know your grandmother has perhaps 3 months without intervention." He leaned forward slightly, hands braced on the desk. "I can make a call tonight. Tomorrow, she sees Zimmerman. Next week, she's in hospice care that doesn't involve waiting in hallways for 6 hours." My pulse hammered in my ears. "What do you want?" "3 months of your time. You'll travel with me, translate during meetings, handle correspondence, attend functions as my assistant. The pay is 50,000 Swiss francs up front, another 50 when the contract ends." He paused, letting the numbers sink in. "Plus all arrangements for your grandmother's care, fully covered." 100,000 francs. More money than I'd see in 3 years of carrying trays. Enough to bury the debts my ex-husband had left behind like landmines, to actually sleep without calculating which bill to ignore each month. "Why me?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Because you're invisible," he said simply. "People like tonight's guests, they don't see service staff. They certainly don't hear us. That makes you valuable in rooms where discretion is currency." He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks, simple platinum, no flash. "Also because you stayed calm when your world was falling apart on a phone call. That suggests you can handle pressure." "And if I say no?" "Then you walk out of here, finish your shift, and go home to watch your grandmother die slowly while you count coins." His eyes never left mine. "I'm not a good man, Alessia, but I'm an efficient one. I solve problems. Right now you have a problem I can solve. In return, you solve problems for me. It's transactional, clean." Nothing about this felt clean. But I thought of Nana's voice, the way she'd sounded tonight, like she was already halfway to wherever we went next, and I thought about the alternative. About being 26 and powerless and watching the only person who'd ever loved me unconditionally fade because I couldn't afford to save her. "When do I start?" I heard myself say. Keller's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or recognition that he'd just acquired exactly what he needed. He slid a folder across the desk. "Tonight. There's a car waiting outside with your first month's advance in cash. Pack essentials. We leave for Milan at dawn." I took the folder with numb fingers. Inside, a plane ticket, a hotel reservation, and an envelope thick with bills I didn't count. Also an address in Geneva's old town, his address, I realized, where I'd be staying before we left. "Your grandmother's appointment with Dr. Zimmerman is at 10 tomorrow morning," he added. "A car will collect her. My assistant will handle the arrangements." He'd already made the call, before I'd even agreed. That should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something closer to relief, the kind that came from surrendering to a current too strong to fight. "One more thing," Keller said as I turned toward the door. "Whatever you see, whatever you hear while working for me, it stays buried. Some of my business exists in gray spaces the law pretends not to notice. You'll be exposed to information that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. If you betray that trust, the consequences will be permanent." Not a threat, a promise. I met his gaze and saw the truth of it reflected back. This man didn't make idle warnings. "Understood," I whispered. He nodded once. "The driver knows where to take you. I'll see you at the airport." I walked out into the corridor on legs that felt borrowed, clutching the folder against my chest like a shield. Behind me, I heard him make a phone call in German, the words too fast for me to catch. But I caught the tone, command wrapped in silk. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering ice across the cobblestones. A black Mercedes idled at the curb, the driver already holding the rear door open. I climbed inside, into leather seats that smelled like money and decisions that couldn't be undone. The apartment Keller provided sat tucked behind a narrow street in Geneva's Ville, all exposed beams and original stonework that probably dated back to when the city traded in secrets instead of stocks, or maybe both hadn't changed as much as people pretended. One bedroom, a kitchen with marble counters I was afraid to touch, and windows that overlooked a courtyard where absolutely nothing happened. The silence felt like pressure against my eardrums. I unpacked the few clothes I'd grabbed from my studio, the lease I could finally break now, the space I'd shared with ghosts of a marriage that had imploded 2 years ago when I discovered my ex-husband's definition of investment opportunity involved other people's money and a one-way ticket to Sao Paulo. The divorce papers had arrived via courier. The debts had arrived via lawyers. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Dr. Zimmerman will see your grandmother at 10 a.m. Address attached. A driver will collect her at 9:30. Marcus. Marcus, Keller's assistant, presumably. I stared at the message, at the efficiency of it, the way my grandmother's survival had become a line item in someone else's logistical empire. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt purchased. But when I called Nana and told her about the appointment, her sharp intake of breath, hope cutting through exhaustion, made the feeling almost bearable. "Tesoro, how did you manage this?" she asked. "I got a new job," I said carefully. "Translation work, it pays well." Translation. She paused, and I could hear her weighing the word against everything I wasn't saying. Be careful with men who solve problems too easily, Alessia. Sometimes the payment is more expensive than the problem. "I know, Nana." "Do you?" she sighed. "Your grandfather used to say that, about the men he worked for in Milano before we left." I'd never heard her mention that time before. My grandfather had died when I was 6, and Nana had always brushed past his history like it was a room she'd locked and lost the key to. "What kind of work did he do?" "The kind that kept us fed but cost him sleep." Another pause, longer this time. "Promise me something, Alessia. Promise me that when you see the edges of things, the places where light stops and darkness begins, you won't convince yourself you can stand in between. You're either in the light or you're not." "I promise," I lied, because what else could I say? I was already halfway into the shadow and we both knew it. After we hung up, I tried to sleep but couldn't. The apartment's silence was too complete, too much like the moment before something irreversible happened. Instead, I opened the folder Keller had given me and found, beneath the ticket and hotel reservation, a dossier. 3 pages, names and photographs, brief descriptions. Associates, the header read, "Handle with discretion." I recognized 2 faces from tonight's event. A French diplomat with connections to the EU Commission, a German industrialist whose company had been investigated for sanctions violations and somehow emerged cleaner than before. The third photograph showed a man I didn't know, younger than Keller but with the same predatory polish. The description was brief. Matteo Salvini. Milan. Competitor. Avoid direct engagement. Competitor. The word felt inadequate, like calling a shark a fish. I studied Salvini's face, handsome in a way that seemed designed to lower defenses, dark eyes that probably lied fluently in 6 languages. The kind of man who'd smile while deciding which bone to break first. I closed the folder and walked to the window. Across the courtyard, a light flickered on in another apartment, and I watched a woman move through her kitchen, pouring wine, pausing to check her phone. An ordinary life. The kind I'd thought I was building once, before I learned that ordinary was a luxury people like me couldn't afford. My phone buzzed again. "Car arrives at 5 a.m., dress professionally. Marcus." 5 hours to become someone new. Someone who could stand in rooms with dangerous men and translate their half-truths without flinching. Someone who could watch her grandmother get the care she needed and not ask too many questions about the currency exchanged. I thought about Keller's eyes, the way they'd measured me in that corridor. Not with desire, that would have been simpler. With calculation. With the cold assessment of someone deciding whether a tool was sharp enough for the job. And I'd chosen to be that tool. For 50,000 francs up front and the promise of 3 more months. I pulled the envelope of cash from the folder and counted it twice. All there. clean bills that smelled like they'd never touched anything dirty. I tucked half into my bag and hid the rest beneath the mattress, a habit from the years when my ex-husband's creditors had come looking. Then I set my alarm, turned off the lights and lay in the darkness, listening to the silence and trying not to think about what dawn would bring. The driver who collected me at 5 was built like he moonlighted as a wall. He didn't speak, just held the Merced's door open and waited while I climbed inside with my hastily packed suitcase. The city slid past the windows in shades of blue-black, streetlights haloing in the pre-dawn mist rising off the lake. Geneva International Airport at this hour felt like a secret the city kept from itself. We bypassed the main terminal, following signs for private aviation. The Merced's pulled up to a sleek building marked only with a discreet logo. No advertisements, no fanfare, just the understood language of access. Inside, everything smelled like expensive coffee and privilege. A woman in a tailored suit greeted me with professional warmth. "Ms. Rossi, Mr. Keller is waiting in the lounge. This way, please." The lounge looked like someone's very wealthy living room, cream leather sofas, abstract art that probably cost more than most cars, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac where a white Gulfstream sat gleaming under floodlights. Keller stood near the windows, phone to his ear, speaking rapid German that I caught fragments of, logistics, timelines, the word discreet repeated twice. He'd traded last night's suit for charcoal wool and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous instead of casual. When he saw me, he ended the call without preamble. "On time," he said, as if this revealed something important about my character. "Coffee." "Please," my voice sounded steady, small victory. He poured from a carafe that probably contained beans harvested by artisanal monks, handed me a cup in porcelain so fine I could see my fingers through it. "Your grandmother's appointment is confirmed. Marcus will text you updates throughout the morning." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, like trying to thank someone for not drowning you after they'd thrown you overboard. "Don't thank me yet." He settled into one of the sofas with his own coffee, gesturing for me to sit. "We're meeting with associates in Milan who prefer their business discussions in Italian. You'll translate, but more importantly, you'll listen. They'll say things in front of you they'd never say in English because they'll assume you're decorative. That assumption is valuable. You understand. You want me to be a spy in plain sight. I want you to be competent." He took a sip, watching me over the rim. "There's a difference between observation and espionage. You're simply paying attention to details others miss and reporting them to you." Naturally, he set down his cup. "Matteo Salvini will likely be at dinner tonight. He's trying to expand his operations into Switzerland, and I'd prefer he didn't. That preference becomes your priority. If you overhear anything useful, you tell me. If he approaches you directly, you're polite but forgettable. Understood?" Why would he approach me? Something flickered across Keller's face, amusement maybe or pity for my naivete. "Because you're beautiful, intelligent, and you'll be standing next to me. Men like Salvini see that as an opening, a weakness to exploit. Let him think whatever he wants. Just don't confirm it." Beautiful? He'd said it like a fact, the way someone might note hair color or height. No weight to it, no invitation. Just another variable in his calculations. "I can handle myself," I said. "I know, that's why you're here." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "We board in 10 minutes. The flight is 2 hours. Use the time to review the files Marcus sent to your phone this morning. Names, faces, relationships. I need you fluent in who matters and why." I pulled out my phone and found the message. A dozen attachments, each labeled with a name I didn't recognize yet. Homework. The kind that came with consequences for failure. "One more thing," Keller added, his voice dropping slightly. "The jet has a bedroom if you need to rest. The door locks. Use it if you want privacy, but know that I don't cross boundaries without invitation. You're not here for anything except the job. Clear?" I met his gaze, searching for dishonesty and finding only that same cold assessment. Clear. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. Alessia, your grandmother is getting the best care in Europe as of this morning. Whatever happens next, that doesn't change. The contract is ironclad. Her treatment isn't contingent on your performance. I need you to know that. The words landed softer than anything else he'd said. Not kindness, exactly. More like insurance. Making sure I understood the terms so there'd be no confusion later, no claims of coercion. Which meant he'd thought about that possibility. Which meant he knew exactly how this looked from the outside. Why, I asked quietly, why make sure I know that? Because I need you focused, not terrified. He held my gaze. Fear makes people stupid. You're not stupid, don't become it. Then he was gone, and I was alone in the lounge with cold coffee and a phone full of faces I needed to memorize before we landed in a city I'd never visited, to work for a man who'd built his empire in places the light didn't quite reach. Through the windows, the Gulf Stream's engines began to whine. Somewhere in Geneva, my grandmother was getting ready to see a doctor who might actually help instead of just managing her decline toward the inevitable. And I was about to step onto a private jet with a man who'd bought 3 months of my life for the price of her survival. The sun crept over the Alps, turning the snowcaps gold. Beautiful and indifferent, the way expensive things always were. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the tarmac, toward the plane, toward whatever came next. Behind me, Geneva disappeared into morning mist, and ahead, Milan waited with its marble and its secrets. The Gulfstream's interior made the lounge look modest. Cream leather seats that probably cost more than my yearly rent, wood paneling in some exotic grain, a conference table that converted into a bed. Keller settled into one of the seats with a laptop, immediately absorbed in whatever required his attention. I took the seat across the small aisle and opened the files on my phone. Luca Morti, textile magnate, 3 factories in northern Italy, rumored connections to the 'Ndrangheta but never proven. Sofia Ricks, Milan city councilor, clean public record, private interests in real estate development that somehow always got approved ahead of competitors. Antonio Bianchi, restaurateur, 6 high-end establishments, alleged money laundering fronts though no charges ever stuck. I memorized faces, relationships, the careful language of legitimate fronts and illegal realities. By the time the plane leveled off, my head ached from the weight of it, this map of corruption dressed in Armani and good intentions. There's aspirin in the galley, Keller said without looking up from his laptop. Second cabinet. I'm fine. You're grimacing. It compromises your professional appearance. He glanced at me then, brief and assessing. Take the aspirin. Drink water. We land in 90 minutes and I need you sharp. I found the aspirin, name brand of course, nothing generic in this world, and swallowed 2 with water from a bottle that probably cost more than my old weekly grocery budget. When I returned to my seat, Keller had closed the laptop. Questions, he asked. A dozen, but I'm guessing most answers are on a need-to-know basis. Smart, he leaned back, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost relaxed. Almost. Ask one. I'll decide if you need to know. I considered my options. Why Milan? Why now? Because Salvini is making moves that threaten a business arrangement I've spent 3 years building. He thinks he can force me out through pressure on my associates, convince them my protection isn't worth the cost. Keller's tone didn't change, but something sharpened in his eyes. He's wrong. Tonight's dinner is a reminder of that. Your presence reinforces it. How does my presence reinforce anything? Because you represent investment, resources, the kind of care and attention I provide to things I value. He paused. Salvini operates through fear and volatility. I operate through reliability and results. You're a walking demonstration of that philosophy. I was a prop. A very expensive, very effective prop designed to send a message about Keller's operational philosophy. The realization should have stung more than it did. Instead, I felt something closer to clarity. At least I understood the game now. What happens if Salvini doesn't take the hint? I asked. Then I remind him more directly. Keller's expression didn't change. But that's not your concern. Your concern is listening, translating, and staying safe. In that order. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing our descent into Milan. Below, the city spread out like a jewel box, spires and modern glass, centuries of ambition built on top of each other. Beautiful and ruthless, exactly like the men who ran it. One more thing before we land, Keller said. Salvini will likely try to engage you directly at dinner. He'll be charming. That's his default setting with women he sees as leverage. Don't fall for it and don't antagonize him. You're polite, professional, and boring. Nothing he says is interesting enough to remember. Understood? Perfectly. Good. He stood as the plane began its final approach, moving with that same efficient grace. Welcome to Milan, Alessia. Try not to die. He said it like a joke. I wasn't entirely sure he was joking. The hotel was the kind of place where even the doormen looked like they summered in Portofino. All marble and gilt, fresh flowers the size of small children arranged in the lobby. Our rooms were on the same floor. His a suite, mine a generous double that still probably cost more per night than my old monthly rent. Rest, Keller said, handing me a key card. Marcus will deliver your clothes for tonight at 6. Dinner is at 8, which means we leave at 7:30. Don't be late. What clothes? The ones you'll be wearing. He was already moving toward his suite. Your current wardrobe, while adequate for your previous employment, doesn't communicate the message we need tonight. Consider it part of the uniform. Before I could protest, he disappeared into his suite, and I was left standing in the hallway with my discount suitcase and the creeping realization that I'd signed away more than just 3 months of my time. I'd signed away my autonomy, my choices, even my fucking wardrobe. Inside my room, I collapsed onto the bed, memory foam and Egyptian cotton, probably illegal levels of comfort, and checked my phone. 3 messages from Marcus, each as efficient as the man presumably behind them. Dr. Zimmerman has seen your grandmother. Initial assessment is guarded but optimistic. Full cardiology workup scheduled for tomorrow. You're booked for hair and makeup at 5 p.m. Stylist will meet you in your room. Mr. Keller requests your presence in the hotel bar at 6:45 for pre-dinner briefing. No questions, no options. Just directives that assumed compliance. I thought about Nana's warning, be careful with men who solve problems too easily, and wondered if it was already too late for careful. But then I opened the next message and my breath caught. A photo from Marcus just delivered. Nana in a private hospital room, clean and bright, with monitoring equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction film. She was sleeping, her face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. I stared at that photo for 5 solid minutes, memorizing it. This was the price. This was why I was here. This was the bargain I'd made, and whatever else happened, Nana was safe. That had to be enough. It had to be. The stylist who arrived at 5 was a Milan native named Francesca, who took one look at my hair and sighed like I'd personally offended her ancestors. We have work to do, she declared, already unpacking what looked like a portable salon from 2 enormous bags. 2 hours later, I almost didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. My dark hair fell in waves that probably violated physics, makeup that made my cheekbones look carved from marble, and a dress, Jesus, the dress. Black silk that hit just above the knee, simple enough to seem understated but cut in a way that probably required an engineering degree. Understated but unmistakable, expensive but not showy. Exactly the message Keller wanted to send. Francesca handed me a pair of heels that looked like weaponized architecture. These are Laubautin. You break them, you buy them. They cost more than my car. Comforting, I muttered. sliding them on and immediately growing 3 inches and a healthy fear of stairs. "You look perfect," Francesca said, packing her bags. "Like you belong in his world, that's the goal, yes." I didn't answer, couldn't answer, because looking at myself in the mirror, I looked exactly like the kind of woman who'd stand beside a man like Keller and make people believe she was there by choice. Which technically I was, just not the kind of choice anyone would write fairy tales about. At 6:45 I made my way to the hotel bar, each step in the Laubautins a calculated risk. The bar was all low lighting and leather, barely occupied at this hour. Keller sat at a corner table, still in the same clothes from the flight, absorbed in his phone. He looked up when I approached, and something flickered across his face too quick to read. "Good," he said simply. "You clean up well. Your stylist is terrifying. Francesca's the best in Milan. She dressed 3 wives of men you'll meet tonight." He set down his phone, his attention sharpening. "Sit. We need to establish ground rules." I sat, grateful for the chair after navigating the heels. Keller slid a small box across the table. Jewelry, I realized. Pearls, simple and perfect. The kind of thing that whispered old money instead of shouting new wealth. "For tonight," he said. "They're on loan, not a gift. Cartier vintage. The message is continuity, tradition, stability. Wear them." I opened the box, hands oddly steady. The pearls glowed in the low light, each one perfectly matched. Beautiful chains, I thought, remembering the motif from the script I'd read in another life. What if I lose them? "Don't." No threat, just expectation. "Now, dinner. You'll be seated beside Antonio Bianchi. He'll try to flirt in Italian, thinking I won't understand. I will let him. If he mentions anything about shipping schedules or port access, remember the details. Salvini sits across from you. Watch his hands. He talks with them when he's lying, keeps them still when he's telling truth. Also watch who he looks at when specific topics come up. That tells you who he's worried about." My head spun with instructions. "Anything else?" "Yes." Keller's expression hardened slightly. "At some point tonight, Salvini will probably touch your hand or your back. It's a test, checking if I'll react, if you're really under my protection or just an accessory. Don't flinch, don't pull away, but don't encourage. I'll handle it." "Handle it how?" "However I need to." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "Ready?" No, absolutely not. But I stood anyway, fastening the pearls around my neck, feeling their weight settle against my skin. A beautiful chain, I thought again, but still a chain. Keller offered his arm, and I took it, aware of how the gesture looked: intimate, possessive, carefully choreographed. We walked through the lobby like that, past guests who tracked us with the precise calculation of people who recognized power when they saw it. The restaurant was 3 blocks away, exclusive enough that it didn't need a sign. Just a discreet door and a maitre d' who greeted Keller by name. Inside, the air smelled like money and secrets, expensive wine, and the kind of ambition that wore tailored suits. I was about to spend 3 hours trapped in a room with men who made fortunes in the spaces between legal and illegal, translating their half-truths and watching their hands for signs of betrayal. And somewhere in Geneva, my grandmother was sleeping in a clean bed with machines that might save her life, paid for by the man whose arm I was holding. The calculus was simple. The cost was just beginning.